All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Okay, let me get my bearings. So we did get our lower low that we expected out of QQQ and everything. So that is perfect. That's exactly what we're looking for. Let's see. 4077 that we're going to be looking at. But they pretty much took out the entire range of liquidity that we were talking about yesterday. But we are going to mark this 4076. Technically, the pre-market's already below this, so in terms of the overall structure, and granted this is TQQQ's chart, but this will translate with SPY, QQQ, everything else. So we do have this very large inverse cup and handle on the daily time frame, and with us finally completing a very large inverse cup, we should start anticipating bearish or bullish structure at the bottom. So just for now, we will mark it like that. But basically on open, that's pretty much the conditions to take profit on these positions. So largely looking to take profit on a lot of our um, positions we entered into yesterday. And we will be looking for either a short or a call in today, but currently it shows that we're pretty much sitting right at the 20 mile, so nothing's opening up just yet. Now, I just want to go ahead and very quickly, I'm just going to go ahead and toss my TQ or TQQQ puts that I have going. Just take the win. Okay. All right, and those should cut out. Now, overall, the day is bearish, but with today being the bottom Bollinger Day 2, with us securing the lower low that we were expecting on the day, technically all the conditions for the day have already been complete in terms of expecting the structure to the downside. Now, on the 1 minute time frame, which I usually don't try to focus on too much, we do have this bullish cup completed. From the bullish cup can be forming a handle. So we will be looking for that. Still no entry into calls yet. If we do get this 641, I will be opening up a TQQ call for next week. And the strike that I want is going to probably that 42 call for next week. No, I might take the 41. The price is pretty good on it. Um, so at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and take the 41 call or TQQQ for next week. And I am also going to be taking a SPY call. Now, this is fairly risky to remember because we do have our volatility elevated and we also have our oil price is elevated as well. So for this SPY call, our upside that we're looking for is up to the 20 mile, which is currently at the 642.28. So that will be our first target here. Now we did have a little bit of invalidation of this previous cup right here. So we're not looking at the cup structure so much. We do technically have a bit of an inverse cup, but what I'm looking for overall is more so of an inverse head and shoulders to form on the day, something to really signify that we will be seeing some of that upside reprieve. Now, in terms of support testing, and I do want to just pull up the daily time frame really quick and go ahead and jump into for the call. I'm going to go ahead and take the 642 second. All right, and I have entered. Okay, so on the daily time frame, we have pretty much all of our support. Wish I didn't have all these drawings. Hold on, I'm going to delete all the drawings. Now, all of our moving averages, technically all above the 650.92 range, which is telling us that on the daily time frame, technically we have already started to receive this partial day one of the lower Bollinger. Now on SPY, I do expect this lower Bollinger to reject. We have had multiple lower Bollinger moves without upside support testing. So either we will be pushing into the lower Bollinger day one on SPY, which currently that's at the 639.16. So that would be suggesting that we go, you know, to 639 and close at that level or below. Not really expecting that out of the day. That can happen. Again, we do have very bearish conditions within the market right now. We do have oil rising. We do have, volatility elevated. So, we do have to be a little careful with that. So, 5 minute time frame. Again, took calls, aiming for the 20 mile here. Now, I do want to take a look at the VVIX. Sorry, I have not been reading chat yet. There's just been a lot to go over. Now, the VVIX is still pushing highs of the day, so we will be looking for that to pull back slightly to signify, that we will be getting some of that reprieve to the upside. QQQ, seeing some of that support coming in. I want to look at NVIDIA, semiconductors, and Microsoft. Semiconductors are actually saying that the position is able to be shorted, or it was anyway. So potentially have that to contend with. However, we also have this cup formed, which I kind of whiffed to the side a little bit, but from that cup, we should be anticipating this handle to form. Basically from testing that 20 mile range, expecting a bounce upside. So we will be looking for that as well. SPY is starting to get a little bit of support in here. Again, for these calls, not for the weekly TQQ calls, we're still holding those for quite a while, but the 0 DTE SPY calls, these are simply just going to be taken up to this 642.13. Um, at that point, if you have runners, we'll let them run. If if not, then take your profit and we will wait for the next setup. So that's what we're looking for currently. I want to go ahead and take a look at our VIX. It is pulling back slightly, so it did pull up all the way to the 130.72. So it has pulled back to the 130.38. So that is indicative of us, at least getting that bullish push up to the upside. Now, NVIDIA, this is a very good signal for us on the bullish side. This is telling us that from lower Bollinger, very likely have room up to the 20 mile. So for NVIDIA, um, we should be expecting, well, basically the price just pulled up to it right as I was talking. So the price pulled up to the 20 mile. From the 20 mile, we should be looking to see if we are going to see rejection from this level back down to the lower Bollinger, or if we will see continued buying the upside to complete this cup. So that's what we will be looking for on NVIDIA. But basically that level did hit already. Buying in NVIDIA here would very likely suggest that we would be pushing up in SPY. So very likely going to be seeing our level hit very soon here. Okay, go ahead and check chat. Oh, those were 0 DT calls. I apologize. The TQQQ calls were for next Friday. VVIX still pushed up into the upper Bollinger, and with it being at the upper Bollinger, this does give us the conditions to see a little bit of reprieve here. So I am expecting us to see a little bit of downside within our VVIX. Check oil. Oil is very elevated today in the upper Bollinger, so can pull back a little bit. Not really expecting that too much. Okay, we're starting to see the push out of SPY. Again, our exit level is going to be at that 642.07. Now, there is potentially a lot of upside on the day, so if you do have runners, try to allow them to run up to the upper Bollinger or beyond. But again, take the primary position profit right when we get to that 20 mile, assuming we don't continue to pull down anyway. Now, I want to look again at the VVIX. VVIX is at 130.54, so slightly pulling up. But again, even slightly pulling up is very, very indicative of dealers hedging their downside. So we do have to be cautious of that. Now I want to look at Microsoft, NVIDIA. So NVIDIA is seeing a little bit of a rejection from this 20 mile range. We'll watch to see if it rejects all the way back down to the 169, or if it tries to, build some support prior to that. That will be very important to see. Now Microsoft has been absolutely dumping over the last few days. However, with it being at the slower Bollinger, we can expect some reprieve to the upside. So we're seeing on multiple symbols that have a ton of weight that we can be seeing some upside from this. Now on QQQ, not really forming any great structure yet. That's just basically a diamond. Let's see, SPY, really nothing forming too much just yet. The IX still slightly pulling up. You have a bit of a first head and shoulders on NVIDIA's 1 minute time frame, which that is bullish. That is telling us that, the potential to pull up is very good. So we will be looking for that to complete. That would suggest that we would be pulling up towards the upper Bollinger on the 5 minute time frame. Our 20 mile level is still at that 642.06, so our exit's still that same level that we're looking for. USO seeing a little bit of upside. BVIX has pulled down slightly, so it's at the 130.28. So a lot of different symbols and signals are telling us that we should be seeing our 20 mile range here very, very shortly. So make sure you all are watching for that exit because that can happen very quickly. But I do want to look at semiconductors here. Okay, so semiconductors have pushed up quite a bit. We do really anticipate some bearish structure to form in here to create the handle to the downside. So we should be fully anticipating that very soon. SPY, we are getting our level here. Not yet. Just make sure you wait all the way for that 642. Now 1 minute time frame telling us very, very likely we should be seeing this cup complete to the upside all the way to the 642.74. From there, anticipate some bearish structure, pull down, likely form a cup of handle on the day. So we will be looking for that very, very closely today. All right, now our SPY calls have hit our level. So go ahead and start taking profit. If you do have runners, then again, you can allow them to run. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, cool. So that is a great trade. Now we are going to be looking for the next setup, which for me, this is going to be shorting semiconductors. So I am going to be taking some SOX as calls. So SOX as very likely going to be taking the 41 calls, but I do want to check the prices really quick. Hold on. Yeah, I want those 41 calls for today. They are still fairly cheap and they should hit very well. Make sure you do not market buy on them. You should put a limit buy in. I'm gonna try at the 65. Those did not buy, so I'm going to set those to 75 and see if those buy. Let's try 72. Okay, cool. Oh, never mind, they still did not buy at 72. Let's try 75. Okay, it did fill at 72. Perfect. Okay, awesome. So for success, we're looking simply just for the 20 mile here, which the 20 mile is at the 4154. Doesn't look like a whole lot of room to the downside, but we're not really trying to take a huge position. Just looking for that very quick scalp to the upside. For semiconductors, this is telling us that the upper Bollinger, we should be seeing at least roughly a $2 downside here, within actual SOXX, but the symbol SOXS itself should at least be seeing that 4154. At that 4154, make sure we exit. That would be a very solid profit at that point. So we will be looking for that. SPY did not completely fill this cup just yet, so we can expect this cup to fill entirely prior to um, that semiconductor short fully taking place. With that semiconductor short as well, there is some room within a SPY short here as well. So just be aware of that. Now, our semiconductor calls are technically puts because on Soxus, the calls would be essentially taking a put on semiconductors. So I'm just going to call them puts. But our puts up are up considerably right now. Technically already 27%. So doing very well on those. And again, we're just simply looking for this 20 mile range here. Nothing more, nothing less. So with that coming fairly close here, that means we can already start to get ready to set an order. Now for my limit order here, I'm just setting the sell at 107. Very likely that will fill, um, because that is not the current mid price. So assuming that mid price pulls up, which very likely it will. Okay, and those got filled. So very quick and awesome trade. Okay, so we've knocked out two, but technically three trades today so far because we did have those TQQQ puts. I think I might have added a 4Q or fourth Q in there. I don't know. We had those puts from yesterday that we took profit on today. So, um, so far three very good trades. Now, with this potential cup and handle forming on SPY, there are a few things to take a look at. Is that one, this cup top did not complete, so potentially this could be trying to form a major rejection here. If we are aiming to take this 20 mile range on the 1 minute time frame for a um, handle to this cup, then potentially, this would be that buying range, but I'm not going to be buying at this range. I don't like buying this range at all. And technically, if we start pulling down on the day and further, that will be telling us that this is going to form an inverse cup to the downside. So I am looking at that. Um, I'm not really wanting to take calls off of this 5 minute lower Bollinger, but I think the call room can be there. I want to look at VVIX really quick, or I really say that though. Still super, super, super elevated. Seeing this push downward pretty low. So VVIX is at the 130.67, 100 or 130.70. I'm basically pulling up to the high of the day. So be very, very, very cautious. Same with oil here. Oil is starting to pull very aggressively. I do need to check if there's anything on the news. Now, potentially these calls, if they're going to land, again, you'd still target that 20-mile range, but this is likely telling that the upside breakout is wanting to take place if these calls, start gaining some weight. But very likely seeing this inverse cup wanting to form. So I'm not going to be taking calls into this. I still have my TQQQ call for next week, which I'm going to be holding. Um, Again, all of our support is pretty much above us. So unless the SPY is going to be aiming for a lower Bollinger move on the day, which it absolutely can be doing, that would mean it would want to close below this 639.79. So we should be anticipating a close below that 639 if we're going to be seeing the lower Bollinger day one taken on SPY. I don't really anticipate that. Again, we've had, I believe, like three or four lower Bollinger moves so far, um, without a single 20-mile retest. So I am really looking for the market to retest this 20-mile, especially with a lot of these major liquidity ranges on SPY being taken. See major liquidity gap taken right there. The next one is basically all the way at this 629. So are we going to be pushing for that 629 today? Very, very likely not. Um, I'm not seeing that type of room today. I did see very absurd room yesterday, but um, I don't expect a whole nother $10 of downside today. Now, 5-minute time frame, inverse cup has closed. So with that, we should be starting to expect some bullish structure at the bottom. From the bullish structure, should be expecting this handle or the upside, even if it's going to be a bear structure to the downside, should be expecting that push back up to the upside. Now, I'm not going to be taking calls into this. I just personally am not liking how elevated the UVIX is and everything right now. And I also need to look at USO. USO is pushing very, very high, so it's going to be fairly neutral in terms of 0 DT positions. But again, um, with the TQQQ calls, perfectly fine holding those currently. Now, if we do start seeing SPY absolutely dumping, then we might consider replacing those. But currently, not worried about those at all. All of our moving average support is above us. So I do want to see the market try to reclaim some of that on the daily time frame. Now, our 5 mile is currently at the 649.90. So assuming we close anywhere from this 6, I don't know, let's just say closing anywhere from the 636 all the way to the 642. That would mean that the 5 mile would be pulling down about to that 646, 647 range. So come Monday, even though we are at the 639, 640 range currently, we would not have too far to pull upward. So again, I am going to be looking for support overall in terms of the day. But we do have bearish conditions. Definitely can't ignore that. And I do want to take a look at the actual news really quick, just to make sure nothing crazy is going on. So we do know that um, there was a strike on an Iranian steel mill today, which That's fine. Doesn't matter. Um, but with that going on, we also have Trump saying Iran talks going very well. So I don't know how that works. Let's see, Russian oil producers, buyers about possible force supplies as Baltic ports face drone attacks. Okay. All right, so nothing major as of current in terms of the news. Sorry, I was looking at my phone for a second. I'm actually tempted to add to another one of these TQQ calls. I think I might do. I really like the range that these calls are at. So I'm going to be taking an additional one. And again, that's the 41 call for next week. You can go 2 weeks out, but with the current market conditions, um, having major volatility in the works, I don't want to be positioning out too far just yet. Just in case we do get this major gap down, in case we do see SPY close below this lower Bollinger, and we trigger, the lower Bollinger mechanics where we see lower Bollinger day one secured, and then come Monday, very, very likely the lower Bollinger day two lower low. So that's what we're looking for on SPY. I'm not really expecting that. Now, out of Bitcoin, I've been seeing quite some selling, so that is fairly indicative of selling within equities. Now, sorry, I just want to look at a few things. Bitcoin really quick. Now, on Bitcoin, which we've been talking about this for quite a while now, doesn't look like it just because it's daily time frame. However, we have been sort of expecting this inverse cup, which somehow got messed up very much, to close back down towards this 60,000 range. From that 60,000 range, we are looking for a further inverse cup to pull us downward much closer to that 49,000 range. So we are still seeing quite a bit of bearishness out of Bitcoin. We are seeing this hourly time frame that Head and Shoulders did complete. That Head and Shoulders completed. So tons of bearish structure here going on Bitcoin. Now with this lower Bollinger being pushed, that can create the conditions where we can see a little bit of reprieve in the buying or in the selling. So we will be watching for that. I do want to check Liquid and HIG. So Liquid and HIG seeing some selling on the day. Excuse me. But from the selling, we can go down all the way to this 78.52. So this would be indicative of SPY pushing that lower Bollinger day one. That's if we push the level. Again, we've been seeing quite a lot of downside throughout the majority of the market for the last few weeks now, so I am expecting a little bit of upside reprieve. Semiconductors pulled down all the way to the 124 today, back up to the 126. did form that inverse cup that we talked about. However, from this inverse cup that formed, we're actually still within bullish conditions. So this has not been an entire breakdown of these levels just yet. Thank you, honey. Um, so with this, we have our cup completed here. We have our handle forming, and our cup has not been invalidated. Technically, this handle would have needed to pull down roughly a whole 40 cents further. Um, so this is looking like a bullish cup to the upside. So we will be watching this. This looks very nice. Now, whoever took those success calls with me, you should have done very, very, very well. SPY, again, we're still just looking for some upside reprieve. Just so very elevated, we see this cup and handle forming here. Very likely going to take us to new highs on the day. Our volatility still very, very, very elevated. Basically still almost at the high of the day. Not entirely, but it is fairly close. So it's at the 131.34. So very, very, very bearish signal. All right. Okay, let me go ahead and look at Microsoft and Silver. Also, if there's any questions about any symbols or anything, now's a really good time because for my positions in terms of the day, I'm pretty much done. For my trades for the day, we had our very, very successful positions. I'm not really expecting chop for the day, but again, I want to see upside. I'm expecting support upside. I don't want to be playing into this chop, and we do have very, very elevated volatility. So while there is room for 0 DT calls, again, it's not exactly the prime conditions for it. And with us already having, had a very, very successful trade, um, you know, multiple successful trades, and with us already securing calls for next week or the week after, depending on which strike or which duration you bought, then we're already set up for the next play. So, um, yeah, plenty of time for questions now. But with that said, I do want to look at Microsoft and Silver, and I do want to look at it beginning on the daily time frame. So for Microsoft here, do you want to look at the hourly for a moment? Now, it does look like there was a 5 mod test here on 323. sh- 20, yeah, that's a 5 mod test. From the 5 mod test, seeing Bollinger. Now, was that an actual push into the lower range on the close though? That's what I need to see. So 623. We did close down low that day. Did have a lower low, a lower low, lower low. So extended lower Bollinger push in here. Actually, I want to see if the 5 mod test. happened over the last 2 days. Sorry, I'm just kind of talking to myself for a moment here. So the 70, 79. Yeah, we had a 5 mod test as of yesterday. Okay, so on Microsoft, now that we have identified this 5 mod test in here, which I want to delete some of this prior structure. So we had a 5 mod test in here as of yesterday. So that means technically Microsoft can be creating the conditions for the lower Bollinger Day 1, which means that the expectation would be to close below this lower Bollinger. Currently it's at the 336, or excuse me, the 361.17. With the 357.10 being hit in here, technically we've already secured the conditions for the day. We just need to close below this 361 to have this lower Bollinger move take place. From the lower Bollinger Day 1, we should be expecting Monday for the lower Bollinger Day 2 to occur, which means very, very likely a lower low. With that lower low, we do have a very large liquidity level at this 352. So I would be looking for that level almost exactly before I take any upside. Um, but from that 352, that fills a very, very, very large cup to the downside. Um, Technically, it can push towards that 342. So from that 352, there can be technically a full $10 of downside. From that $10 of downside, leading this very, very large cup, we do always expect bullish structure to start forming at the bottom of the cup. So either it will form at that 352 or the 342. It really just depends on which gap that wants to take prior to that. Um, a lower Bollinger move today into Monday with a lower low. That's telling me very likely the 352. So just have to be very careful for that. But again, a lot of our symbols are going to be sharing this exact same structure where we're pushed very, very low below all of our supports. Again, on Microsoft, we're well below the 200-day moving average, the 50-day, the 20-day, the 10-day, the 5-day, um, pretty much below all of our support right now. So we should be really looking for some upside reprieve. Um, Even if out of Microsoft, we don't really expect that upside reprieve today, or even really most of Monday. So that's what we see out of Microsoft. Um, just mainly these two gaps right here you have to look for. The 352.97 and the 342. 352 looks very good for Monday. So if we see bullish structure forming at that 352 come Monday, um, I might even take a call to the upside. So that's Microsoft. Again, it can pull up basically to this 360 range on the day, and it would still be bearish, even though it might look like upside buying. Um, just needs to close below that lower Bollinger on the day to secure the level. Okay, so that's good. Let's take a look at silver. If I could find it because I'm a blind man. All right, so I want to circle back to the silver ETF. I want to look at the silver futures first off. Now, thank you. With the silver futures, do see that this inverse cup on the daily time frame has been completed. We do see the lower Bollinger day 2. So day 1, it's not going to mark it. Okay, so day 2 lower Bollinger right in there. From the day 2 lower Bollinger, see our move up to the 5 mile, which fully anticipate. From that move to the 5 mile, either we will be seeing further downside to the 60, or we will be seeing support reclaimed back up to the 20 mile. Okay, so support back up to the 20 mile takes us back up to that 78.54. Rejection back down takes us to the 60.94. Okay. Overall, it does look bullish to push to the upside. Now, very likely there is going to be an inverse head and shoulders forming here, but we will take a look at the hourly time frame. Turn off the charges just to look at this. So, a couple things we do have to contend with is that one, potentially there is this very large head and shoulders on the hourly time frame. We'll just mark these in blue just to show that bearish structure. With that, we also have this smaller head and shoulders on the hourly. So this is telling us that, potentially our downside is starting to hit, or, will come in anyway. Because if this liquidity is going to play out, then it's extremely likely trying to take some of this downside gap. Okay. Either it wants to take towards this 63, or it wants to take all the way back towards the 60.94. Now, with that with that bearish structure being identified there, we do technically have bullish structure in here as well. Okay. We do have the cup, and this handle has not rejected the cup yet. We have not pushed down enough to invalidate the previous bottom of this cup. So if we see continued buying from this range, it will invalidate this smaller head and shoulders. And from invalidating that smaller head and shoulders, it will work to invalidate this hourly head and shoulders. From invalidating the hourly head and shoulders, it would complete a cup to the upside. Cup to the upside would take us to that 74, which does start bringing us back towards that 20-mile range up at the 78. So that's what I'm looking for on the silver futures. But in terms of the actual silver price, that would take us back up towards the 71.21 daily time frame. Now, within the silver ETF, we're not seeing the exact same movement out of silver that we saw within the futures. We're not seeing this very, very strong head and shoulders forming. Instead, see more of this head and shoulders there, but we still have this potential up and handle. So that would take us back up to that 67.50. I'm gonna mute 1 second. So I am gonna be mute just for a couple minutes. But just a reminder for next week, I will be sticking to the standard streaming schedule. If I could talk, excuse me. Um, so Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I will try to stream Tuesday and Thursday if we have additional time, but we will be sticking to the standard Monday, Wednesday, Friday at the minimum. But anyway, I will be back in about 5 minutes, everybody. I do want to just show the SPY on the 5 minute time frame here while I am gone. Excuse me. We are expecting support to the upside. I do want to delete some of these drawings here. But we are expecting support to the upside. Now, the upside we're expecting isn't just this 20 wall, but I am marking that 20 wall. So that would be where you would, excuse me, exit any calls, um, on the day that aren't running potentially to the upper plunger on the 5 minute time frame. But yeah, anyway, I will be right back, everybody. All right, I am back, everybody. Sorry about that. Okay, so I want to go over why I use the Heiken Eishi candles, which I probably butchered the name of that, but I do apologize. So, one moment. Okay, so standard candles. They like to show, how do I explain this? Standard candles, there's obviously nothing wrong with them, but for me, they don't show the trend properly. Um, With the Heikin-Ashi, it allows it to have more of a flow to it rather than this is a buying candle, this is a selling candle, this is a buying candle, this is a selling candle. Um, where compared to the candles, it's very, very definitive. It's either going to be a buying candle or selling candle. It doesn't really have that flow to it. So there's times where you can have these massive candles down and it doesn't look like there's structure here. So for example, and I'm gonna use this as our little guide here. But for example, right in here, most people wouldn't be able to identify structure with this. Um, just off of my own skill, this looks like some form of potential inverse cup, something like that. But when we swap the style to the Heikin-Ashi, we now see that it's actually physically that inverse cup to the downside. It's physically flowing to the downside. Um, this downside pressure is just flowing to the downside rather than chop, 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 chop. Okay. Um, so that's why I like the Heikin-Ashi a lot better. Doesn't mean that it's better or worse. It just for me it shows the flow. Um, more so like a river, I guess, than compared to the standard candles. Standard candles are just very, very price point oriented, about what's going on within that price rather than the actual flow of what we're seeing. Are we seeing the buying trying to grab towards the bottom? For example, in this 5 minute time frame, we see a ton of grabbing towards that downside. It's almost like little fingers sticking out trying to grab towards that level. As creepy as that is, but um, with the standard candles, we don't see that. We just see, oh, okay, there's buying, selling. I don't really see any structure in this. It's just kind of there. And then Heikin-Ashi, oh, well, it's just actively pushing to the downside. So I do like the Heikin-Ashi a lot better, primarily due to that. So now on SPY here, on the 5 minute time frame, we do have this very potential. I mean, this is like pretty much the most perfect Head and Shoulders I've ever seen, but Head and Shoulders. Now, this Head and Shoulders is telling us that very, very likely this is trying to push down much further here. Now, that much further room, again, we identified that at this 629. We're very far from that level. So I'm not very concerned that we're going to be seeing, you know, some $10 downside. Not too concerned about that one bit. We have hit all of the previous um gaps that I'm looking at. There is a gap at this 638, basically right at the 638. So we're gonna mark that. But other than that, um, the downside today should be, fairly mute in terms of, you know, seeing some absurd downside crash or something like that. I'm not seeing that today. Yesterday I saw that. Um, yesterday I forgot what level we were at. We were all the way up almost at the 655, and I was seeing all the way down to the I want to say the 644, 642, something like that. So yesterday was really that big selling day. I'm not seeing that out of today so much. Um, Now again with today on the daily time frame, just to very, very quickly go over this again. The daily time frame is kind of contending with this lower Bollinger. Now, with the lower Bollinger, either we're expecting a push well below that level. So today, if we're going to have the lower Bollinger close, we should be closing basically well below this 638.93. Um, I'm not seeing that out of today. It can happen, but I'm not really expecting that, especially since we've hit all the previous very, very important gaps that we needed to hit. Um, there's really no sentiment today unless, obviously something major goes on with the conflict in Iran. Um, there's nothing really out of today's sentiment to pull us down a whole nother $10 roughly. So I'm expecting that bounce there. But if we do secure that lower Bollinger day one, then come Monday, this 629.58 would be very much within range to be taken. So we will be looking for that into the close, but my expectation really is that we're going to reject this lower Bollinger, see some buying, and very likely earlier next week head back up towards that 5 mile range. Now, today is QQQ's day two lower Bollinger, which does mean we should be anticipating some buying on QQQ. If I can actually grab my circle there, we should be anticipating some buying kicking in on QQQ. We had the day one bottom Bollinger yesterday. We saw the low level we wanted secured. Today we see the lower low. And from this lower low, we really don't have, again, much structure below us unless we're really going to sell down very, very massively, which I'm not really expecting it on the day. QQQ is already telling us that at least tech is expecting somewhat of a bounce today, um, which that would give us our bounce out of this lower Bollinger on SPY, reject that range, and then very, very likely next week we see SPY, QQQ, semiconductors retest the 5 mile, and then we can, from there determine if we're going to head back up to that 20 mile on the daily time frame. So that's what I'm looking at currently. Even with us pushing downward today, we can push again to that says 370 or 637.92, but it's actually basically right at the 638. But we can't push down to that level, and from that level, that would be basically a very, very, very opportune call opportunity. And even on the 5 minute time frame, this is correlating with that. This is showing us that on the 5 minute time frame, we should be expecting, if we're going to be pushing downward, to hit that 637.81, which that would very much so tag this range. From that range, it would be a very, very quality call opportunity back up to the 20 mile. So if we do push down, I will look for a 0 DT call into that. Um, but other than that, I'm going to be pretty patient on the day. I don't want to short into this. Again, we are expecting some support to be seen out of QQQ. So overall, don't want to continue to short into today too much. Um, our VVIX is still super, super elevated though. Um, we do have to be cautious of that. If we're going to be seeing some of that upside buying, then we should be seeing this pull down quite a bit today. Very likely towards the 127 range. So we still have a bit of volatility to cool off. And our oil did have the cup and handle breakout, so that is bullish. However, from this breakout, cup and handle, and on this cup, should be expecting again another cup and handle. And let me check the 1 minute time frame. 1 minute time frame here is actually showing us that potentially we can be forming a head and shoulders. So that can start pulling against the day in terms of, or that can start creating some buying in equity weight if we see oil prices continue to slump. A put at the right shoulder would be a good play. Um, I think it can be. I'm just very hesitant to take puts on anything right now. And again, even though today is very bearish overall, and this is the 1 minute time frame, so we can be seeing something like a rejection off of the upper Bollinger here on the 1 minute time frame, heading back down towards that level. But again, we are expecting buying on QQQ. Okay. QQQ has fulfilled every single condition it needs to, you know, complete for the selling side on the day. So technically, QQQ doesn't have to sell off a single penny further. It is completed everything it needs to complete for today to see the upside buying reprieve. So with that, that will be taking quite amount of weight into SPY, not so much into semiconductors. QQQ and SOX has been split up quite a bit to where they can somewhat move individually, but even on semiconductors, um, we do see some bearish structure in here. But on the daily time frame, see we have the lower Bollinger at the 323. So very much like with the SPY here, if we're going to be seeing this lower Bollinger pushing us to the downside, then our downside's going to be really big, but it's far too large to be within the realm of today unless we see some very, very, very absurd news from, the conflict out of Iran. A lot of what's going on with semiconductors and SPY is telling me that very likely we're going to see a rejection off of this lower Bollinger. So for SPY, QQQ, semiconductors, that's going to be a bounce to the upside. QQQ, we're getting that bounce very well so far. I want to look at the 1 minute time frame. On QQQ, the 1 minute is starting to invalidate this head and shoulders. So if we continue pushing up basically to that 658.40, um, or excuse me, the 568.40, then we will be invalidating this head and shoulders. And from there, we can really start looking to the upside. Same with semiconductors and very likely SPY here. SPY is already very, very close to that level. So this right shoulder already becoming invalid. So that's good for our calls. It's exactly what we want to see. Now for the VVIX, we want to see this starting to get crushed, which starting to, not entirely, but it's beginning to. We want to see well below this, 128, 127 range if we're really going to be seeing that upside bounce that we're expecting throughout tech and everything. Oil still super, super elevated, so we Do have to contend with that. SPY has hit the 20 mile on the 5-minute time frame, which is at the 640.27. So from this range, this does become basically a contention range from pushing into the upper Bollinger or breaking back down to the lower Bollinger. Again, my expectation is for it to push upward, complete the cup here, form somewhat of a double bottom, and give us some of that upside structure. Very likely would complete this cup back up to that 643, basically that 644 range. So would give us a high on the day, would technically give us a green day as well if we see the support that I'm expecting us to see in here. So yeah, very welcome. The 637.92. Okay, so how I got that is I base it off of previous selling ranges that we see. Um, and I want to go to the 4-hour time frame. I believe I got that off of. Yeah, 4-hour time frame right here. We see at the it's basically right at that 638, but my marker is at the 637.92. But this is a major support range because this is the 4-hour time frame. So with that selling to the downside, there was a major reason to start buying from that level. So we do track the previous support range there. From that range, that does create the conditions to, see that previous support taken and continue buying to the upside. So if we're going to head down further, I am looking for that level to be hit. And we can go off of pretty much all of the previous supports in terms of that. So daily time frame would obviously hold a lot more weight. We check each one of the supports. So say we haven't had any of this selling yet, and we wanted to figure out some of the supports that we can start looking towards. You just start tagging some of these bottom ranges, okay? Those are support ranges, and we know that because from the bottom of that range, we see massive buying. Massive buying, massive buying. So that works the same way within lower time frames as well. So that gives us that 638 that we can be looking at. Now I do want to look at the 1 minute time frame here. So we can be having the cup and handle form, which this would be telling us that we would be basically pushing up towards that 642, 643 range. So if we see the cup and handle breakout here, that will be exactly what we're looking for within the call positions that we have. Yeah, you're very welcome. And I know they're not exactly gaps. I call them gaps. Um, but the way I see the market is that every single penny, um, it doesn't matter if it's selling or buying, it has a purpose. That level was taken for a reason. So every single sell, every single buy, um, needs to be mapped out. And that's where we get a lot of our bullish and bearish structures from that we form and things like that. I'll do a class on that. Probably not this next week. I've taught some of the classes on this in the past, but I haven't done the actual video of it. But I would like to go over um, how we determine some of these structures and things like that because I feel that would be very, very useful for the majority. But every single candle, every single penny has purpose, and because it has purpose, we know that we can use it to determine future levels. So, um, that's kind of how I like to think about it. Very likely seeing our cup and handle playing out here. It might be because of my candle type. Again, my line style is the Heikin. Um, it might look different if I'm using standard candles, but I am playing or I'm trading the actual just SPY, so the SPY. Now next week I will have it so that the time frame shows up much easier to see, so it won't just be you know, very, very tiny in the corner because I do swap between the time frames very often, so that might be part of it as well. Okay, everybody, I am going to be ending the stream fairly soon today. Um, I do need to get my daughter in the car and everything. If there is any final questions, now is a really, really great time to go over um anything or any tickers or anything you want. But I will be mute for probably about just 2 minutes, and I will be back after that. Right, everybody, I'm back for just a few seconds here. If there's any final questions, now's a perfect time. If not, then I will be putting out a video probably Sunday. I always want to put one out on Friday, but it never seems to happen. But there will be a video coming out this weekend, so again, I'll be going over the weekly trend, the data sets and whatnot. Excuse me. I'm trying to yawn in your all ears and get you all tired. Get silver real quick. We should be seeing, yep, there we go. I was gonna say, we should be seeing buying. There we go, so that works out. Um, Semiconductors, I want to look at you really quick as well. Our bullish positions to the upside overall should be very, very good. We did see semiconductors pull down. We can see semis start to reject this previous bearish structure, then that would be the bullish signal pretty much for the entire market, since everybody is pretty much waiting for, say it's either Nvidia or Microsoft right now. Microsoft reclaiming support, cup and handle. Let's see, Nvidia. Yeah, Nvidia needs to see that support kick in a little more. We do have a cup built here, so we should be expecting a little downside prior to heading up further. But overall on the day, should be expecting buying to the upside. Not really expecting a whole lot more selling. Now, I do want to look at the volatility really quick. Did pull down to the 129.24, so it is slightly up since that level. I'd still be looking a lot more towards this 127, 126 range on the day, if not even pulling down all the way to that 124. Um, will be a little shaky though, because again, oil is extremely elevated right now at 122. So that is going to be weighing against equities quite a bit, and also very, very likely increasing our volatility throughout the day. Now, with the conflict in Iran and everything I've seen for the most part shows that overall there really hasn't been any deal. There really isn't going to be a deal so far. The Iranian side has been pretty much saying that our side hasn't been working with them and everything else, even though our side is saying that we are. But we did end up blowing up one of their steel manufacturers today, so I don't know how that works in terms of talking ceasefires. But unless we see something major out of the Iranian conflict, we really shouldn't be seeing a whole ton more downside on the day. Our volatility, for the most part, should be pretty much set for the day. I don't really expect it to pull up too much further unless we see something start with the conflict, but I'm not really expecting anything right this moment. Bitcoin still seeing a little bit of selling throughout the day, but with this cup closing, a little bit of an inverse cup and handle forming, that can start giving us a little bit of that reprieve. and I want to look at HIG and liquid really quick. So we did have HIG selling quite a bit today. It is buying up roughly about 15-20 cents so far, which may not seem like a lot, but for HIG that every single penny to the upside matters. So that is very indicative so far of, retesting support to the upside. And we should see very likely the same out of liquid. Yeah, same out of liquid. So yeah, let me go ahead and check chat. So the calls I have for next week, currently I'm sitting on TQQ calls with hold on, I want to make sure I'm telling you the right strike. The 41 strike for next week. Currently they are red, which that's fine. But overall, I am expecting a bounce on the day and a bounce from a majority of these levels, which for TQQQ, that would secure us that 41 very, very easily. So I like these calls for next week, even though we might be getting pushed down slightly. Gold and silver. Gold and silver, we're expecting a lot of their support to be retested. Now I haven't talked about gold today, but I talked about it a few days ago. We were really looking for below that 4100 range. It basically hit right at that 4100. From that 4100, it has started buying to the upside. Its buying so far is very bullish, which, you know, that should be you understand what I'm saying. This buying is bullish rather than bearish buying. It's not creating liquidity to head back downward so far. Very likely from this 5 mod test, we should be seeing, excuse me, this upside buying to the 20 mod. 20 mod currently is basically right at the 4900 level. So we should be seeing quite a bit of upside within gold and silver. Silver doing much of the same thing, heading back up towards the 20 mile range. Yes, next week as Friday for the expiry on those TQQQ calls. Alright, everybody. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and end the stream here. I hope you all have a great rest of your trading day and a great weekend. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope many of you were able to have successful trades today. But with that said, have a great day, and I will talk to you all in the next stream or in the next video. So take care, everybody.